when's it going to happen? There's, so-and-so, he said this, it was going to happen 10 years ago, and it didn't happen, and somebody said it's going to happen 5 years ago, it didn't happen. Well, folks, let me tell you this. Here's the timetable, okay? And I'm gonna connect it with something else, so please pay very careful attention. 10 years ago, okay, when the dot-com bubble, we had a little, economic I'm sorry, that's like 15 years ago, excuse me. We went through economic recessions. So in other words, when we're in a fiat system, and I'm sure that the listeners know what a fiat system is basically currency printed out of nothing, backed by nothing, being pushed out there. That's what a fiat currency is, by edict, okay? Fiat currencies last about 40, maybe 50 years or so, then they go bust. Because in order to sustain a fiat system, you got to constantly blow bubbles. Well, we blew the dot-com bubble. Then we blew the housing bubble. And a whole litany of other bubbles before that. We are currently out of bubbles to blow. So now we're into straight-up number manipulation, okay? And this worked. Okay, so if I were to give everybody a succinct definition on the U.S. economic system, it's this. It is a giant Ponzi scheme. And one of the things I always said to people is a Ponzi scheme only works just so long as you have a willing sucker to buy into the scheme. As soon as you run out of suckers to sell your Ponzi scheme to, the Ponzi scheme falls apart. And the people realize, hey, the emperor has no clothes. It's the same situation in the global scale, okay? A couple of years ago, we didn't have the BRICS. Okay, you go back 15 years, there was no BRICS. There was no talk about a BRICS bank. There was no talk about between the Russians and the Chinese setting up these energy deals, $400 billion energy deals. Okay, there was no new Silk Road. Okay, there was no Eurasian trade zone, which compasses 17 time zones with massive amounts of global GDP and wealth concentrated there. There isn't any of that. But these things happened. Okay, people are like, well, why is Russia and China trying to destroy the dollar? Well, they're not really destroying the dollar. They're reacting to something that we are doing. The blame for destroying the dollar is ourselves. Okay? So years ago, we didn't have all these things. Now we have the AIIB. We have all these trade zones. We have all the infrastructure set up. We have the alternative, the SWIFT for international banking. All these systems and subsystems are already set. It's already built. The infrastructure is there. They're just waiting for somebody to turn on the switch. That's it. Everything is there. And what is that switch going to do? Everybody's in place. They're just waiting for the dollar to get done away with. Okay? And as I'm talking to you guys, okay, my latest report states that foreign nations, especially in the developing, emerging markets, have increased their foreign reserves by 400%. And that does not include the dollar. They're de-dollarizing. Russia has dumped 50% of its dollar holdings. The Chinese are dumping the dollar holdings. These things never happen. You go to a bond auction today in the United States, the number one buyer of U.S. bonds is the Federal Reserve. I mean, that's insane. The number one buyer of U.S. debt is the American Central Bank. I mean, it's crazy. Okay? So this game can't continue, number one. Number two, the infrastructure is in place. Everything is ready globally for this thing to blow and for the world to move on without the dollar. It's already in place. What you're seeing globally with all this terrorist nonsense, all this propaganda about Russia invading Ukraine and all that other nonsense, which is not the case, folks. This is all propaganda because the dollar's dying. Okay? Now, that being said, one of the things that I've gotten from my sources and from the data that I'm looking at, I put out a report stating, and various reports, back in 2013, 2014, that by the end of 2015, we're going to see the undermining of the United States dollar as the world reserve currency. What does that simply mean? I didn't say dollar death. I didn't say dollar destruction. I said undermined as world reserve currency. Okay? We enjoy the lifestyle we lead because of the simple fact that our currency is used as the de facto currency in world trade and as the de facto currency used for trading in oil, okay, for pricing oil. That's starting to change. The world does not need a petrodollar anymore. That's going away. The world reserve currency status is going away as well. Countries have woken up to the fact that they don't need that. They don't need to pay the middleman. So the very thing that financed our lifestyle, the dollar, is being ditched. Nobody wants it. They're throwing it out. Okay? All these systems that I talked about earlier, these infrastructural systems that are set in place, okay, for a post-dollar world, that's in place, and all these things are undermining the dollar as the world reserve currency. So we're on that schedule. But by the end of 2015, the dollar will not be the king dollar anymore. And what I mean by that is this: we entered 2012, okay? We entered 2012 as the dollar was used by around 72%. I'm sorry, 2008. In 2008, the dollar was used 72% of all global trade, okay, was done in the dollar. Today, top firms are reporting it's anywhere between 45 to 47%. In other words, we've dropped over 30-some-odd% in global trade. They're de-dollarizing. And the Fed is buying it all up on the back end. Now, you add this whole thing going, you talk about the Ponzi schemes, we're looking at, by the time of 2017, this thing is over. You cannot sustain it. We got away with it before because people were willing to buy our debt. Countries were willing to buy the U.S. dollar because at one point the dollar was as good as gold. Now the dollar is as good as toilet paper. Nobody wants it. So this game and this charade is going to go pop, and it's going to go pop soon. But the average American will not know this until the very rug is pulled from underneath them, because you turn on TV, oh, the stock market is at 18,000 points. And I guarantee you, folks, we're going to see a 20,000, possibly even a 30,000 point Dow before this whole thing blows, because they want to keep the charade going. That's the timeline. You got about two and a half years at the most.